This is City Manager Bill Osmond, and welcome to a special edition of On the Agenda. I say a special edition because today I'm turning, for most of this program, turning the mic over to a guest we have with us, someone who's no stranger to the television camera. Gwen Summers Redwine, welcome to On the Agenda.
Well, thank you, Mr. Osborne. It's good to be back again.
Well, it's great to have you. February, of course, is Black History Month, and 2 years ago, I had a couple of programs that I did on Black History Month, and you were one of my guests at that time, the first guest, in fact, that we had, because we were talking about black history in Douglas County. And we'll revisit that topic in just a minute, but first I want to tell our viewers a little bit about your personal history. Of course, Gwen Summers Redwine, she grew up in Valdosta. In fact, was among the first African-American students in the Valdosta school system to start the desegregation process. Worked as a radio personality, kind of pioneering in that, and then moved to Atlanta, where she was with for several years, WTBS, and the old watch this channel grow, whatever that was.
TCG, WTCG.
And then worked for several years for CNN. And of course, we'll get you an opportunity in a minute to talk a little bit about your early days as you wish to. But of course, here in Douglasville, you were the first African-American to be the president of the Cultural Arts Council. You and I worked together on the 96 Welcome Committee, which was the local effort on dealing with the 1996 Olympic Games. But just give us a few facts, as you wish, concerning the days in growing up, and then how you came to Douglas County.
Well, I wanted to be sort of like Walter Cronkite or Chet Huntley and David Brinkley. Do you remember those guys?
I do.
I would watch them on TV, and I had in my mind, you know, I think I'd like to do that for a living. And I was a little girl then. So I knew it was kind of hard to get into that field of journalism, especially being an African American. And in fact, was told by some of my college counselors that I was wasting my time pursuing a career like that.
Right.
But I've never been one to have people stop me from doing what I feel like I want to do.
Right.
And so I started working for a local radio station. They gave me a job. I was the first black person to do news for a rock and roll station. Right. I guess they liked the way I did the news, and I stayed with them until I went to Valdosta Daily Times. I was told that in order to get a job in TV, I needed to get as much journalism experience as possible. So then I went to the newspaper, which I was told that was the best way to get training for any kind of job in journalism, and it really turned out that it was very good training for me.
Right.
I wrote obituaries at first, then I started doing some feature stories. And it was from there that I was asked to audition for WAOK radio here in Atlanta. So I drove up in my little car and interviewed, and they hired me.
Great.
So I gave a notice to the paper, got with the radio station, so I said, oh, I'm closer to some TV stations now. So maybe 6 months in, I applied with Bill Tush on WTCG, and they hired me. So I worked there part-time and at the radio station full-time for another 6 months, and then I went on full-time with the TV station and stayed there until I started my own business. I resigned to start a sports marketing firm, which was very successful. I worked with all of Ted Turner's professional athletes.
Right.
They would all often come into the studio to do public service announcements, and I noticed that they were having difficulty getting words out. So I started a little business to train professional athletes.
Right.
So I ended up working with some of the Falcons. Ted's teams were the Braves and the Hawks. And so I had a bunch of Hawks players, a bunch of Braves players. Terry Harper, one of our guests today, was one of my students.
Right.
And Falcons players. And then from there I went into a television venture with a very dear friend in Atlanta. Then I started the television news here in Douglasville.
Right.
Then I ended that, and then I started working on all of this historical stuff. So
Right.
that brings us up to date,
Right.
to where I am now.
So we're talking about black history, so you've been talking about history in the making
Yeah,
today.
yeah.
But, you know, 2 years ago, I did two On the Agenda programs each month. Now, under our schedule on City TV, I do only one program. And the second program I did, I spent time talking with our two African-American council members at that time, Henry Mitchell III and Callie Burke Combs. But the first program I did, we started off, you and I, talking about your work on black history in Douglas County. And the other interview I did, of course, at that time was with Lonnie King, who was, back in the 1950s, led the student sit-in movement in Atlanta, which, of course, was what caused the desegregation of Atlanta restaurants. And, you know, kind of as an aside, would point out to our viewers that all of our past city TV programs can be seen by going to our website, and we're going to show what that address is if somebody wants to jot it down, because I think those two programs back in 2008 provided some good information, and with what Mr. King was talking about with the sit-in movement and a lot of things, that's living history that we had before us.
Wonderful.
And so, but you know, for our viewers that may have any interest in any of our former programs on City TV, they can just click on and watch those, and especially on those two programs in 2008, would recommend those to people who had an interest. But here we are in February of 2010.
Oh my goodness.
And what we plan to do is we plan to have you talk with some guests concerning black history. But as you look back from 2 years ago and the work that you were doing then on collecting information on black history in Douglas County, kind of bring us up to date. I know that's a long-term project that you're working on.
Bill, it's so funny. I've been working on this book on the baseball team for 2 years.
Right.
First, it was hard to get a publisher. Then I finally got a publisher. Now I can't produce the book, okay?
Right.
So I'm still working on it. But I felt that I could not put the book on baseball in a correct Georgia historical context, because I didn't know enough about the history of the state of Georgia in which to do that. So I decided to go back to school. So I started taking some graduate level courses at West Georgia.
Okay.
My intention was to get my master's in history.
Okay.
And but I've got to take the GRE, and I've been studying for that so that I can actually finish the master's program.
Right.
They have already discussed perhaps my thesis being the Negro School Lodge. So I've already done work for that. And I was a 4.0 student when I took those 3 classes.
Congratulations.
So I'm certainly capable of doing the work. I just
Right.
don't know if I'm capable of passing the GRE, but we'll see.
Right.
So I think once I get that behind me, I can concentrate more on how to properly write a book that would be of a scholarly nature, as
Right.
opposed to just writing and not knowing what I'm doing, you know?
Right. Well, we look forward at some point in the future with being able to see the finished product.
I hope so.
But you know, when we talked 2 years ago, there were 3 subjects that you focused on. One of those, of course, was the baseball team that you've been mentioning. Another was basically in Douglasville was the Douglasville Negro School and Masonic Lodge. And then a third was David Howard, an Atlanta millionaire, African-American, who had some holdings, business interest here in Douglas County. But in just a minute, when we come back on the agenda, rather than me being in my chair, you will be in my chair interviewing some people. But I want to tell you, I appreciate you joining me today, appreciate you taking over a large segment of on the agenda. You know, I wouldn't trust just anybody on being in my chair here. So,
I know. I appreciate your asking me. I actually feel honored that you did. And you know, I do love to talk, so that comes really relatively easy for me. But
right. But when we come back from the break, you'll have your first guest.
Okay. Thank you.
And look forward to seeing the rest of today's program.
Thank you so much.
Hello, I'm Mayor Thompson, and my city TV is local government.
Welcome back. I'm here with Miss Jeannie Syriac. She is the African American Programs Coordinator for the Historic Preservation Division of the Georgia Department of Natural Resources. Thank you very much for being with us today.
Thank you.
You were here with us back in, I believe, November of 2007, and you identified for us a historic treasure. We knew it was important, but we really didn't know what it was. And it was a building that's owned by Pleasant Grove Baptist Church, and it's located at 2525 Old Lower River Road. And I just want you to tell our listening audience, our viewing audience, and our listening audience, how did you identify that building, and why did you think it was so important?
Well, when we first went to the setting, I noticed there were three structures in close proximity, that being the Pleasant Grove Church, the Lodge School, and the cemetery. And in many rural African American communities, you might find these type of structures. Basically, I knew it immediately because I've seen many one-room schoolhouses, as well as schools that appeared a little bit later than this one, that were known as Rosenwald schools. So a lot of times I go around the state trying to find these buildings. And so when I saw the Beulah Grove Lodge School, I said, oh, this is a rarity because we don't have a lot of them that we know about anymore, at least in a rural setting.
Well, you did tell me two things. You said that it was rare, and you said that if we wanted it on the register, we needed to get started right away because the process took about 2 years.
Right.
And it did. It took about 2 years. And so now we have succeeded in placing it on the Georgia register. That was in June of this year. No, that was in February of this year, I believe. Now, what does that mean for the community?
Well, what it means for the community is for a property to be listed in the National Register of Historic Places is very significant. This is our nation's collection of buildings and historic places that are significant both to the states that they come from as well as to the history of our country. In particular, as it relates to the African American experience, the reason that I said the school lodge was rare was that there aren't too many of these buildings left. And they help to tell us more about how African Americans lived, primarily during the segregation era. It played out a little differently sometimes in a rural community because at that time this part of Douglasville was rural. Usually the community really helped to support these schools. This lodge was built around 1910. At that time, there were less than 40% of all the schools in Georgia for African Americans were public. So this means, especially in a rural community, that the community had to take charge themselves in terms of providing education for their students. So the lodges are particularly important because not only did the community build these places, but they maintained these places. And that is exactly what happened in Beulah Grove.
Now, are there any other similar lodges you can cite in the state?
Yes, there are a few. We have about 15 or 16 Masonic lodges that are listed in the National Register of Historic Places in Georgia. We're beginning to really study this and to identify other buildings, which is kind of why I recruited you guys to be listed, because I know there are a lot more out there than those 15. But one that is very similar, also in a kind of rural setting, is the Chickamauga Lodge. And it too even almost looks identical to yours, where the bottom floor was used as a schoolhouse and the top floor was reserved for Masons. In an urban setting, the Masonic Lodge might look a little different. What comes to mind immediately is the Auburn Avenue Masonic Lodge, which later became home for the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, or SCLC. It was a brick building.
That was a beautiful
but that
building.
was kind of unusual.
Did they build that building? Would they have built that building? The Masons?
Yes, very likely.
That's a beautiful
gorgeous
building. It is beautiful.
Got the emblem on it.
Yes, it does. It does. I just love looking at it.
But we have about 16 around the state. And but the one that most closely mirrors yours would be in Chickamauga.
It was interesting to look at it because there were some similarities not only with the building, but also with the Masonic benches that I saw inside of that structure, and that's what helped me identify the Masonic benches in our lodge school, because I didn't know what they were.
Right.
So I'm like, okay, I've seen this before, so that was helpful. The narrative that we had to provide for the school also was extremely interesting, and we learned that a freed slave, Jack Smith, actually donated the land to the church and to the school to apparently build the school lodge and the church. So we assumed that he was a Mason. We also assume that he is buried in that cemetery, although we haven't been able to find a grave for him. So we did find that. So it was just interesting. And then when the committee asked me to submit more information on the lodge, we learned of some of the students who attended the school, some of the teachers who taught at the school. So a lot of interesting history came out of that process of preparing that 2-year-long application. What do you think we can utilize the facility for once we get the restoration effort started?
Well, I think buildings like this, they were built for community use. So the best way to adapt them currently is also for community use. In many instances, the lodge, and I think historically even Beulah Grove might have served this purpose, where sometimes it's a fellowship hall for special events that the churches may be putting on. Or sometimes you can use it for other educational purposes, like hosting community lectures and meetings. And then the Masons can always use this top floor, as they historically have, for their private meetings. But that's the most common use.
Okay. When do you anticipate that we will have it formally listed on the National Register?
Well, we're very hopeful that it'll be in February.
Yeah. Okay.
During
Great.
Black History Month. We have submitted the final nomination to the National Park Service, and it usually takes about 45 days. So we're hoping it'll be.
45 days.
We're hoping it'll be right around February.
Okay, well that would be good. Maybe you can come back. We're going to have a
celebration,
a ceremony, and maybe you can come back and join us for that.
I would love to.
Is there anything you would like to let the viewing audience know before we end this interview about how they can help to preserve our history?
I think it's very important, though it was a grueling process for us to nominate more of these types of properties to the National Register of Historic Places. It gives a good documentation of Black history in a rural setting at the local level. And let's face it, historically, African American history was not covered as much as the literature. So it's not just about documenting all the stuff about the building. It's bringing to life the people associated with the property.
I agree. Well, thank you for being with us
today.
Thank
you, Gwen.
You all stay with us. We'll be back with more.
My name's Marsha Hampton, Community and Downtown Services Director. My City TV is downtown.
Welcome back. We're here with Terry Harper. Terry is a former player for the Atlanta Braves. He was the first African-American player drafted from Douglas County in 1973. He grew up in Douglas County, and he played with the historic Douglasville Pros baseball team, the subject of what we're going to be talking about. And that's why he's here today, to talk about his early days with the Pros before he became famous. Thanks for joining us, Terry.
Thank you very much, Gwen.
Now tell me about your days with the Pros, and you were a teenager, or how old were you?
Actually, when I first started, I was around that 12, 13 range, and I was mostly the bat boy. I just used to run around, and if the guys needed something to drink, soda pop or whatever, I was kind of the kid that they would, hey, Terry, come here, and send me on errands. And that's kind of how I got started.
Did you ever play, or did you learn anything?
Well, I eventually playing, I think my first year I played, I was 16, and I was pitching, and I pitched that game, and I was so excited because you can imagine a kid getting a chance to play with guys he grew up watching them play and admiring them over the years. And all of a sudden I was in the game, and I remember I was so pumped that I was just throwing the ball all over the place, and I remember hitting someone.
Well, apparently you improved because you did pitch for the Atlanta Braves, didn't you, at one time?
Yes, actually I was a good pitcher. Actually I was known for more for my pitching than I was for my hitting and playing in the field. But like I said, being a young kid, just the excitement and controlling those emotions was real difficult at the time.
Did they let you pitch anymore?
No, they didn't.
They should have given you another chance, Terry.
Well, the pro team started coming around at that time. I was lucky enough to get drafted by the Braves, and then I went into the Braves minor league system. And so that kind of curtailed some of the.
Well, that was a better opportunity, I would think. But getting back to the pros and the Douglasville Tigers, was there really a fierce rivalry between those two teams?
Yes, it was, because at that time Sunday was everyone was after church. Everyone go out to the ballparks, and really, nowadays they would say standing room moment. I mean, you could hardly get into the park. And at that time, the teams and the people that watched the game, they would do a lot of talking, and for bragging rights. And so it was real exciting to be a part of that, because and then the pros, they had won for years. They were the team to beat. They were the Yankees of the league. And so it was fun being around those guys. You associate the pros with winning.
All right. Well, according to Benny Henry, who founded the Tigers, well, he purports that his team was the winningest team. So we'll see. We're going to be talking to those guys a little bit later on. So we'll just see how they are talking today about that time in history. I understand from your sister, who is Judge Barbara Caldwell, and whose late husband was a member of the pros, that she postponed her wedding to go to a game, a Douglasville Pros team. And that's one of the more profound stories I've heard about how, how people just traveled around and followed you guys and supported you. And after church, they would all get together.
Everybody.
And they would travel everywhere. You guys played all over Georgia. Name some of the places where you all went.
Barnesville, Coast Hateville, some of the small towns, just all over South Georgia, Thomasville, Macon, Sonoya,
Carrollton.
Carrollton, and some of the places was, I was so young, they wouldn't even let me go. So that's how far back the pros go. But the, even though the Tiger was a really good team, the perception was the pros. The pros were the team to beat, and everyone, if the peoples were at the ballparks, I would say 70 to 80% of the people were pros fans. In my opinion, I guess I was kind of one-sided, but that's kind of how we felt.
Now, during that time, back in 1958, when Thurman Zachary founded the team, the players were in high school.
Right.
They were not adult men. Then they later on became members of the amateur professional baseball league, if I'm not mistaken, Josh Gibson League.
Okay.
And Thurman gave it up 10 years later, and then Jesse Davis Sr. took it over. Now, when you were with the pros, who was the manager?
Jesse Davis Sr. was the manager at that time. Now, when I was I was around when Thurman was, but I was like a little small because I was 3 years old when they got started. So, but from as far back as I can remember, the pros were associated with winning.
Okay, now Terry, when you were old enough to travel, how did you all travel, especially if you had to go long distances?
It mostly carpool. It was like a big picnic. Everybody would load their car with food and drinks, and for some of the other people, they would put a little something a little stronger. So at those ballparks, it was a lot of partying and just a whole bunch. It was kind of festive, everyone. It was just a festive atmosphere, and people just having fun.
Well, when you ended your time with the pros, were they saddened that you had to go, or were they happy that you were drafted by a professional baseball team that was paying you some money? What was the reaction?
Everyone was excited for me because, there was several guys on the team probably had the ability to play pro ball. I was one of the lucky ones that got the opportunity, but there were several guys that were good enough. But everyone was happy for me. They was pulling for me. Everyone congratulated me. I still like to them. I was still the little bat boy, little guy running around fetching stuff. But yeah, they was everyone's in my corner pulling for me.
Well, it sounds like those were some very, very good and exciting days, and hopefully we can expose the Douglasville Pros and the Tigers to the community so they can understand that we had some history, baseball history going on back then.
Yeah, it was quite an atmosphere, and in the black community, like I said, it was just so. I guess the people, everybody go to church, and then the atmosphere at the ballpark, it was just something for people to see. No matter what color you are, it would have been fun to be around.
Well, thank you for joining us today, Terry. I really appreciate your taking the time out of your busy schedule to share this information with us.
Thank you very much.
Coming up, we'll have more on the Douglasville Pros and that fierce rivalry between the Pros and the Douglasville Tigers.
My name's Marsha Hampton, Community and Downtown Services Director. My City TV is downtown.
Welcome back. I'm here with Benny Henry, founder of the Winston Tigers, later the Winston Colts, Jesse Davis Jr., one of the players for the Douglasville Pros, and the son of Jesse Davis, for whom our park is named, and Thurman Zachary, founder of the Douglasville Pros, and he founded that team in 1958. Welcome, gentlemen.
Welcome.
Let's begin with a little background information on the Josh Gibson League, for which both teams played. And I guess I should ask you, Benny, since you seem to know more about the team and the league and how it was organized.
Yes. We organized that team, I think it was in 1956. We got together and organized the team and went around through the metro area looking for ball teams to join this league, and we found about 8 teams. And that's where we got started.
When did the when did the Pros join the league? Because I know you all were members of Josh Gibson League first.
Mr. Zachary can tell you more about when they joined the league.
Yeah, we joined in 1958. We organized our baseball club in 1958. And we organized, they were a little older than we were. And so we were a little younger, so they were kind of, they were about, should we join them? Because they were about 5, 6 years older than we were. And we thought we can play along with them. So we got together and we determined that we were going to join the league. And so we did, and we proceeded after that.
Now, at first, they didn't want y'all to join because they didn't think you all were
too
good
young.
Enough to play against them. Okay, but of course, you proved them different.
Right.
Okay.
10 years later.
It took them 10 years. Okay. Just tell me about some of the experiences while you all were playing, some of your travels around, and Jesse, some of the experiences that you recall.
Well, I was very young then, of course, when they got started, and Thurman here is really the one that got me started before my daddy took over the team. And I used to go around with Thurman them because I remember riding on the back of the truck all the way to Rome and stuff like that. And when my daddy took over the team, then that's when I became an everyday player. And some of the experience I more or less experienced is that we played double hitters every Sunday, and it was hot. One of the ones that I most remember was a double hitter we played in Carrollton, Georgia. It was a hot day, And usually everywhere we played, now this was during segregation, so the ball field would be over near the projects, and there will always be a liquor house, a bootleg house somewhere around the ball field. Well, this day in Carrollton, Georgia, we was playing, and it was a hot day. We had a double hitter. We won the first game pretty good. But by the time that second game and that heat and that drinking and all that those fans be doing, it gets pretty rowdy. We had a guy came up off the hill where the fans were in our dugout, grabbed one of our bats, went back up on the hill working on somebody. And so we had to get somebody out of the team to go back up there to retrieve the bat. We had the fields didn't have any lights. So the fix were in, and the game was tied, and it was getting dark, and the umpires never would call the game because it would have ended in a tie. Finally, when they hit a ball in the outfield and our players couldn't see it, and their guy just circled the bases, once they got home, the umpire said, "Ball game, over."
That didn't seem fair.
No, it didn't. But what I remember most about that is that I saw one of the greatest sportsmanship things I ever seen. I remember the manager of the Carrollton team, which was named Long. He came over and told my daddy, which was our manager, he said, "Look, my boys over there talking big talk, and they going to a little juke joint up the street here. Y'all got to go by." He said, "Get your boys together, and I have my truck down here on this next street, and y'all meet me." And he led us out of the back way.
Well, there were quite a few funny stories you told me about your memory of those experiences.
That was one of the good ones.
And one of the highlights of one of the stories involved the penitentiary. That was after desegregation, right?
Yes. We played the Atlanta Federal Penitentiary, had a team in our league. Mm-hmm. Of course, they couldn't come out, all the teams that go in there to play. And we really enjoyed going in there to play because it made us feel like we was playing in the big leagues. Beautiful manicured fields, umpires on every base in white shirts, and plus they even had announcers that announce your name when you come to bat and tell what you did the last time and all that.
And throw in a new ball every time you foul one off.
Throwing a new ball every time you foul one off, and then they had a bat boy that it would be wiping our bats down and all that stuff. But the bat boy in the dugout that they assign us, he also be hustling for the prisoners. He'll say, "Hey man, I give you some balls. This guy over here wants your sunglasses." Or this guy over here like those sneakers you got. I give you a new mitt.
Well, that was manageable, right?
Right, that was manageable. But we always paid great ball in there, and they gave us great games.
Well, there are so many stories that I know you could share, but I thank you for sharing those. But I wanted to ask you all about something that seems to be at the root of some confusion as to who was the better team, the Winston Colts, Tigers, or the Winston Pros. Now, I interviewed you each, Benny and Thurman, on different occasions. And Thurman, I believe my quote from you is that you all played 50 games and you only lost 3, and that y'all were the best team ever. Then I interviewed you, Benny, and you said that the Pros came into the league and they were a bunch of young boys and we whipped them.
Yeah, when they first came into the league.
When they first came into the league.
We whooped them for 2 years. Mm-hmm. Then we got old. And they were young. You know how it is when an old man trying to jump on a young man, he go get whipped.
Okay. Well, I want y'all to talk about that famous game at the Larry Bell Park in Marietta.
Well, we had a game going on up at Larry Bell Park one Saturday night. We jumped out and scored 19 runs in 8 innings.
Wow.
And the Pros, we were leading the Pros, I think, about 19-2 or 3.
18-3.
18-3.
Right.
And all at once, our team blowed up.
Disaster happened.
Our team blowed up, and they come by and passed us. I think y'all beat us about 24 to 8.
18.
And you remember after all these years. Oh, yeah. Okay, so they came up from 2 in the last inning to beat y'all.
To beat us.
By 21 points. in the last inning. What was a contributing factor to that? What was the problem? What happened?
I think we got tired.
We just run them. They get, when you get old, you can't go. So
But they weren't that
we just
much
had
older
a
than you
cloud of dust,
guys. Well,
and I told them, I never forget that though, because one thing that was so outstanding about that game was that it was a lot of joning going on, and it was whipping us pretty
Yeah,
bad.
everybody buddy.
And
buddy,
we hit.
was.
I think we started off that inning with we hit 5 consecutive triples in a row. We started the inning out, and we got it going, and we was rolling. And anytime they throw the ball, it was just a cloud of dust, and somebody else was stealing home or whatever base they was going to, and they were just throwing the ball around. And they just got upset.
I think what it was, we had such a big lead, and we took our best ball players out of the game.
No, y'all was still in the
We
game.
took
No,
our
you
best
didn't.
ball players out of the game, and brought these younger boys in there, and they come in there and they blew up.
No, y'all was still in the game.
I
Y'all
pulled
was
a
still-
drunk man off the bench. I pulled on third base when he went in the game that night. I pulled him off the bench to coming back with the bases loaded, and he hit one across 3 ballparks up there in Marietta, at Larryville Park. You remember that, don't you, Mr. Zach?
Yeah, I remember that. I remember all
He
that.
was drunk, and I was on first base when he hit the home run, and the ball went so far. I had to wait till he get to the base. He was drunk, and let him test the base here. I let him follow me on down to second. I touched second, and he come on behind me, and I told him, I said, test this base here all the way around. If we were whipping him, so I put a drunk man out there to bat.
Yeah, they was drunk when we got through with them. All y'all was drunk.
Yeah,
we got through with y'all.
We sure was after the game.
well, I went to the Atlanta Daily World and I found some newspaper articles about you guys. And this one says that the Winston Pros, the North Georgia District Champions, are seeded number 3 in the Georgia State Baseball Tournament. And this was in July of 1962. And this one says that the Winston Tigers or Colts wins the Josh Gibson North Georgia Tournament. This was also in 1962. So it seems that both of you all were playing pretty well in 1962 in the league, and that you did dominate the league for a long time.
We lost one game that year. 1962, we lost one baseball game in 1962.
I found
and that
numerous.
was the first game of the season. You remember me telling you this once before.
Well, I found numerous accounts of you all playing during that year and the year before and the year after, but I just wanted to reference these in all fairness that both of you all were really doing pretty well during at least that one year. Now, wasn't there some, didn't you all integrate the teams with some white players?
Yes, my team, we first wanted to integrate any kind of team in Douglas County, period. I'll never forget 1962 and 63, little Neil Chumley, he came here, wanted to play baseball with us. He's a white fella, but he was a med from the Army. And he wanted to play baseball because he played baseball all the time. And so he heard about the pros, and I asked him, would he like to join with us? He said, yeah, why not? And so we got him to start playing, and the people, it was still segregated then. They didn't want him to play because they wanted black and white to play together. And so I told him we didn't have no problem about it. He said, well, he from the service, and he's all men treated alike in service. He said, you in service, you have to take care of the other man back. Whatever you don't see it, you have to look out for the other man. So he believed in was playing together. So the police came over the park one day, gonna stop us from playing together. He thought he couldn't play with them, and he said, "Man, look, I fight for you just like I fight for the blacks. When we was in service, we said, ain't no segregated in there. Why does it got to be segregated out here?" So he tried to explain to him why did he want to play, and he said, "Well, we're gonna go back to City Hall. We'll talk about that next week." But in the meantime, so we rather you not playing. He said, "Man, I don't see no why we couldn't play." And so he continued to play, but they left alone. I remember one experience we had down at City Park, Hunter Park down there. the whites were playing down there, and we had a baseball meeting that night, and we left the meeting. We knew they were playing down there, so I took the guys, so let's go back and see the white boys play. So we went down there to the park. And here come the police again, tell we can't come to the park because you're black. Go to your own park. I said, no, we want watch the guys play, because Bill Fight, he was managing the team here in Douglasville, and you always have a good team. But so we eventually got together and we started playing each other. Red William and his brother and Paul them. And so we finally got together and played them. And when we played them, we beat them that first time. We beat them 8-6 that first game. And then later on, about 3 weeks later, we played them again. They beat us. I think they scored about 7-5 or something like that. So we were at tit for tat. And one thing about our team, we just join each other about we beat y'all beat us. We just call a lot of kidding going on. And so that's what started us playing each other. And after they see Lanier Chumley, he wasn't going to quit playing us. So he continued to play us, and he played till he finally left Douglasville.
Well, it's interesting you mentioned Bill Fight, because he's the husband of the late Woody Fight,
right.
for the Senior Citizens Center is named for Woody. But Bill, I understand, was a very good friend to your father, Jesse Davis, and he was quite instrumental in having the park named for your father because of all the work he had done in the community with the baseball team. And Bill's Phil Williams, who coached the Douglas County Tigers for many, many years, also played on that baseball team against you guys.
Yes.
So that's some interesting history there. Benny, talk a little bit about your brief stint in the Negro League.
Well, in 1948, the first season, the first of the season, the Birmingham Black Bears, they was looking at a pitcher that I had that was pitching for us when I played with the old Carrollton Honey Drippers on a little traveling team. And they come out there, they wanted this pitcher. And I was a catcher. I could catch them if they hit out young and bounce over your head, I could still catch them. They can tell you. I would get it. I was a good defensive catcher. And the pitchers we had down there, the catcher we had down at Carrollton, he couldn't get him out of the dirt. He was getting kind of old. He couldn't catch him. So every time this guy pitched, and they were called Sims. Every time he pitched, he could throw so hard, he throw 100 miles an hour. And every time he throw low all the time. And the ball get in the dirt, and the catcher would let him get away from him. So and I told him I could catch him. And so the manager let me catch him, and I was digging them all out of the dirt. So when the Birmingham Black Bears, they came up, they want him to come and pitch for them. This was in 1948. And he said, I will go if you let me bring my catcher with me. And they said, we don't need no catcher. And Carl said, well, he can play some shortstop too. So you can let him catch me, and you can have him around for second string shortstop. And so they took me on out there, paid me $20 a week.
Big money.
And I got out there. They had said I never saw such good ball players in my life.
And you met Willie Mays.
They had George Crow. Used to play with the Cincinnati Reds. He was playing third base. I mean, playing first base. And that Willie Mays playing the center field. I didn't know nothing about no Willie Mays back in them days. Only thing I know, Will played Willie Mays against Willie Mays out here at the mill out here at Douglasville when he played with the Chattanooga Choo Choo. Me and him was the same age. So I stayed out there with Birmingham about 2 months. I got in about 15 games and broke my foot down here, and I come home. They were wanting to take me in. I didn't break it. I sprung it real bad, and they wanted to break it and set it back where I wouldn't have no limp when I get older. So when I was young, 16 years old, I said, I ain't gonna let y'all break my feet. Y'all take me back home to my daddy. So they loaded me up and they brought me back home, and I come back home, my foot got well, and We organized a little baseball team down at Winston, and that well,
Well-
I've been ever since.
Well, I think that's great. You had an opportunity to play with the Old Negro League. In fact, someone from the Old Negro League, an historian there, told me that the leagues were the end of the Negro League era
Yes.
all
Yes,
around the
yes,
country.
It was the
Yes,
end
it
of
was.
it, yes.
Now, the Indianapolis Clowns, you all played exhibition.
I played the Indianapolis against the Indianapolis.
You played
Clowns.
with them or
I
against?
played against.
Oh, you did?
Yeah. I kind of played against them at the end of their era, too. And I've got stories on them in my museum, complete with pictures and type of stuff like that. And you know, the Clowns, they go way back. They had Goose Tatum. They used to play at Globetrotters. He played with the Clowns. Jack Johnson, the first black heavyweight, he started with the Clowns. So a lot of people think of the Clowns as Hank Aaron era, but the Clowns go way back.
They sure
And
do.
see, the Clowns were the like Globetrotters of baseball.
That's
They
right.
had like guys that sit in a rocking chair and catch. I saw a guy, his name was Birmingham Sam, throw a guy out at first base from third base behind his back. And they also had a one-armed first baseman and a midget that played second. And like Benny said, you never saw such good ball players
In your life.
in your life with these disabilities and stuff. And they were like traveling. And when they comes to these little small towns or big cities, they'll just gather up a local team to play
Yeah,
against
that's the
them.
way they played them. Yeah.
That's the way they played them.
But they was a part of the old Negro League.
Right.
Like
You know,
with
Satchel played.
Birmingham,
He
yeah.
played. He played with Indianapolis Clowns too.
And of course, Hank Aaron
Hank Aaron played
played
with the Clowns.
and his contract was sold to
Aaron
the
played with the
Braves. That's how
Clowns.
he ended up in
He was
Atlanta.
playing with the Clowns when I was with Birmingham.
Well, that's interesting. Speaking of your museum, it's a cowboy museum,
Yes.
and it's located in where?
It's located in Southwest Atlanta. It is I opened up a cowboy museum to show the history of the black cowboys of the West. This is the only museum in the South that shows the history of the black cowboys of the West. And since I was a part of baseball and all that, I also included the Negro Leagues, a lot of history on that too. And I shows it in pictures, memorabilia, and artifacts and other type of things too. And also, I'm writing a book on a couple of local cowboys out of Douglas County, Willie Flip Cook and Silas Blue Reed. There's a history behind them, whatnot, that needs to be told. And of course, everybody knew Flip, but they didn't know that Flip was the only and first black judge of the National Walking Horse Championships in Shelbyville, Tennessee. This is a rich man thing. Flip is the only black man to ever be a judge there. And when Flip passed, he was a millionaire himself, in which the man that he worked for was Johnson, that owned the Ritz-Carlton downtown and over 400 Waffle Houses. Flip trained champions for him. He took Flip money and invested it for him and made Flip very wealthy too.
Certainly sounds like an interesting story.
It's an interesting story, and I'm going to
Sounds
write
like you've been
that
doing
story.
a lot of research
Yes,
on
I
that.
have.
So this explains your attire and what you have on, and that
Yes.
decorated jacket and your cowboy hat and your cowboy boots.
Yes.
Okay, now the museum is where? In what county?
It's in Fulton County. It's located on Welcome All Road, which is about 10 miles from the Hartsfield Airport.
What's the address?
4225 Welcome All Road, College Park, Georgia.
And it's called
The Black Cowboy Western Museum South to distinguish it that it is in the South. Now, they do have Black Cowboy Western museums out west. The biggest one is in Denver, Colorado, but this is the only one in the South that shows the true history of the black cowboys of the West.
Well, thank you very much for that, and thank you all for sharing your experiences and your stories with us today. We really appreciate having you.
You're welcome.
And I'd like to thank you for watching this segment and this very special edition of On the Agenda. And coming up next, Bill Osborne with his wrap-up of this special edition.
Hello, I'm Mayor Thompson, and my city TV is local government.
Hey kids, be a player. Get up and play an hour a day.
Welcome back to this special edition of On the Agenda. I have one more guest that we want to include on this special program, and that's the newest member of the Douglasville City Council, Samuel Davis. Mr. Davis, welcome to On the Agenda.
Thank you, Mr. Osborne.
Now, you viewed the interview that Gwen Summers Redwine did that involved your brother and a couple of other people. What did you think about that interview?
Wonderful.
Gave a little history back from 50 years ago.
Yes, sir.
And I know you were a part of that. So tell us what your role was with the baseball team.
My role with the baseball team, Mr. Osborne, I was the bat boy. And I still have the uniform from back there, and I was showing the other guests in here today the uniform from being the bat boy, chasing the balls.
Right.
And my talent wasn't good enough to be on the team, but I can run the ball and get the bats.
Well, I know that every team needs a bat boy as well as players in the outfield and the infield. But those were some special days, weren't they?
Yes, sir. Very special days.
Because on the agenda for February, being Black History Month, we wanted to just show a good slice of life here in the African American community back from 50 to 60 years ago. And I think we accomplished that.
Yes, sir.
Now, tell us a little bit, though, about yourself, not only being the bat boy, but bring us up to date a little bit in terms of what you've done. And I know also you want to mention your nephew as we look at Black history from the 50s all the way up to 2010.
Yes, sir. Mr. Osborne, growing up on the north side, it was good. I had a lot of things I was involved, from Little League to playing with the Douglasville Braves, from being in the entertainment as a musician over at our cousin, Mr. Steele, James Steele. Mm-hmm. He created and taught me a lot when it come down to music and being a drummer.
Right.
Then as years passed, when integration came about, I was one of the whole group from our cousin to go to Douglas
mm-hmm.
County.
Mm-hmm.
And from that point, we had to audition for the band, and man, Mr. Wheeler gave us the Nutcracker Suite to audition. And each and every one of the kids that was involved in music passed. And that was the start of my career as traveling as a musician.
Right.
And we did the Cotton Bowl Parade in Texas. Tim Wheeler was he was my Michael Jordan, because he taught me how to be a professional. Mm-hmm. Because when we would march and we did not be on that line, he would become behind us in that baton. He would get us up on the line.
Right.
And so, and then from that point on, we organized a band called the Purple Haze Band, which most everybody who grew up here knows the Purple Haze Band. Right. We traveled throughout, and I had a great time with the Purple Haze. We did a lot. And back then we had a whole lot of hair, and one of the pictures I still got from back in the days, I had an afro.
Right.
And man, it was an afro. And from that point on, I played with a rock band on the ground, Atlanta, from here in Douglas County, called Southern Smoke, mm-hmm. with Tommy Cook. So I've had a great experience in growing up here, and
right.
And now I'm a professional DJ, and I work in the professional field now. And
right.
And coming up, I will be performing with Yolanda Adams at the Gwinnett Civic Center.
Okay.
So I'm still involved, and plus being a barber, professional barber, and I love life.
I know in talking about all the things that you've done in music, that there's one particular individual that you've mentioned to me that you wanted to include as you reminisced back in terms of music here in Douglasville. Tell us about this particular individual.
Yes, sir. The Reverend Lewis Cobb Jr. They grew up in my ward, and he was just phenomenal amongst kids. He organized the Douglas County Community Choir, which he brought those kids up to where they was just so professional. And the album, I still have that album today, the Reverend Lewis Cobb Jr. And he's been passed probably now about 2 years, and this is a part of Black history.
And we're delighted that you're now a member of the Douglasville City Council. And, you know, it's kind of like history connecting. Here we have Samuel Davis on the City Council, and everybody probably in this community is aware of at least the name Jesse Davis Park, that being your father. As we conclude today, give us a couple of things concerning your father, but also want to mention your nephew.
My father, he created a path where you have to have a goal and a vision. He did not let anything stand in the way. He didn't ask nobody for nothing. He just went out and just done it. Mm-hmm. And Justin was the same way. My nephew, he went through Douglas County, and he just topped all the records in Douglas County. Then he went Carnell and went through Carnell. I mean, when I went to the graduation, I did not believe all the ropes that he had around his neck.
Right.
And then once he graduated from Carnell, he went to Georgetown, and they was pulling on him then. When he came out of Carnell, he was head of a lot of little groups, little pocket groups in Carnell. Once he graduated from Georgetown, and he started working at the White House, and Hillary, they grabbed him, and now he's an ambassador at the White House for Hillary.
Councilman Davis, I appreciate you being with me today on the agenda. And in a moment, I'll be back to talk final comments with Gwen Summers Redwine.
Here we go. What? What?
You don't have to be perfect to be a perfect parent, because kids in foster care don't need perfection. They need you.
Hi, I'm Shan Weeks with Keep Douglasville Beautiful, and My City TV is good for the environment.
Well, Gwen, that was a great program, and again, I appreciate you being here to conduct those interviews. To our viewers, I know that you found this interesting. We'll have a different type of program next time, and I hope you will join me. But before we close today, I always give my guests opportunity for final words. So,
thank you, Bill, for giving me the opportunity to interview these individuals, and thank you for giving them the opportunity to share their stories with us.
Well, thank you for being here, and until next time, this is Bill Osborne on The Agenda.